Hi everybody, I'm Tim from troutandfeather.com, and in this video we're going to talk about using a nail knot connection. Stay tuned. There are lots of different tools and techniques to connect your leader or your backing to your fly line. And trust me whenever I say that, over the last 27 years or so, I think I've tried them all. Some of the ones that come to my mind include maybe that first one. It was this little piece of metal, had a loop on the end, and you would jam it into your fly line, and it had these barbs so it wouldn't pull back out. You tied your leader directly onto it, and it seemed to work well, except over time, it created a weak spot in your fly line, and it would just tear right there. I next tried these Cortland loops, and I believe they're still being sold by Cortland and other companies right now. And they were slick because they would simply slide onto your fly line. You could super glue them in place, or you could put like a heat shrink tube over them. And then you really just had a nice loop on the end of your fly line, and you can connect your leader with a loop-to-loop connection. They were nice, but there were two shortcomings that I found with those. The first one was, if I ever had my rod tip up high and my line pulled my leader back inside the guides, it was difficult, and sometimes that connection would snag as it was going out the tip top. The other thing that really seemed to kind of pull me away from it was whenever I was fishing dry flies, that connection had a tendency to sag in the water. And I didn't like that because I felt like I was always applying float into that section. Well, in the late 90s, I was reading the Fly Fisherman magazine, and I read about this other really cool technique that involved the super glue connection. It was a really slick connection, and what I loved about it were two things. Number one, it was really straight. I mean, it was straight fly line, your leader, and it was just at a perfect 180-degree angle. The second thing that was great was it really just flew out of your guides. So I love that, and I really liked that connection. I used it for about 3 seasons until I was fly fishing for steelhead, and you know it, I had a really nice fish on, and that leader just pulled straight away from my fly line. I'm sure it was something that I did. Maybe it was because of cold weather, but all I know is I immediately kind of revisited all of those different knots and those different techniques that I had tried over the previous years, and then I thought to myself, here I am trying all these different knots with my leader, whereas with my backing, I'd been using the same one since the beginning, the nail knot. So I then kind of switched back, and I've been using the nail knot to connect my leaders ever since. Now during this video, what I'm going to do is change the camera angle. I'll show you the tool that I've been using for about the last, let's say, 7 or 8 seasons, and I'll show you how it works. I'll also give you a few tips that will help you out, especially because there is a tendency to have a little bit of a knot coming off, or a little bit of a tag end of a line coming off, and I'll show you a neat little trick to kind of help you out with that to make sure this comes out of your guides smooth. So let me change the camera angle right now, and I'll show you a little bit more about the nail knot tool that I use. Here's a look at the Angler's Image nail knot tool that I've been using for, geez, I don't know, the last 6, 7, 8 seasons. This is the original packaging that it came in. It also came with an instruction sheet, and the cost is anywhere between $10 and $15 depending on where you buy it. And if you take a peek at the tool, there's really not much here. I believe it's aluminum, it's very lightweight, it's got a little clip on one end, and there's really 3 main working parts. The first portion is this little thumb rest. You'll see it kind of indented there. We have a channel going through the center, and on the back side we have a little notch, and that's all there is to it. For the demonstration purposes, I'll be using a dark colored fly line and then white colored backing, so those two will kind of contrast against each other, and it'll work well for this video. Now before I demonstrate the knot, let me first say that let's talk about the fly line. When you typically buy a fly line, one end will have a sticker on it that says something like, attach this end to the fly reel. I don't attach the butt end to the fly reel. I actually attach it to backing. So I attach backing first to the fly reel, then the backing to my fly line with a nail knot. Then on the other end of my fly line, if there's maybe one of those loop connections, I'll cut it off and I'll attach the butt end of my leader to the front end of my fly line. Now for the purpose of this tool, the fly line will be inserted into it the same way. It doesn't matter if you're using backing or a leader. It's going to go into this tool the same way. So we can assume that this backing represents both a leader and or backing for the purposes of this demonstration. So let me show you how this works. For starters, I'm just going to extend the backing, or pretend it's the butt end of the leader, about, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches out from the tool. I'm going to have it go around in the notch. I'm just going to wind up 5 times. Once I get wound up 5 times, I'm going to take this tag end I'm going to insert it into that channel and have it extend out through the front. If you're doing this with a leader, it'll be a little bit easier. The backing's not so easy to always get through those, but we got it there nevertheless. Now we're almost finished. It's really that simple. I'm going to take my fly line. I'm going to insert it in the opposite way until my thumb kind of captures it in the channel. Once I'm there, geez, we're pretty much finished. I'm going to take the tag end of either this will be the butt end of my leader or my backing. I'm just going to pull it down very firmly so it really just seals around that fly line in one really fluid motion. Here we go. And that's all there is to it. Now, don't assume that you're finished yet with the tool, with this process, because at this point, I can almost take that knot and slide it up and down my fly line. And sometimes if I don't want to waste a lot of my fly line, I'll actually slide it a little closer to the tip. Now, once I get it very close, I would wet my leader a little bit or wet my backing. I would just dip it in a little bit of water. And then I'm going to take my hand with this long section of backing, and I typically will grab a pair of hemostats with this tag end, lock them in place, and pull really tight. Once I have that pulled tight, I then will be able to grab my fly line and either the backing or leader, pull, and it won't budge at all. It's secure. But make sure that you initially tighten, again, either your leader or backing and that tag end. Make sure you pull those tight because that's really what's going to firm that material up against your fly line. Once you have that portion tightened, you can just grab your nippers, a pair of scissors. I'm just going to cut off the tag end of my fly line really close. And then the same thing with the backing. I'm just going to grab that tag, pull it up, and just trim it as close as I can. Now, at this point, we're finished with the knot. We're ready to go fishing right now. However, I said there was one little tip for you, so I wanted to save this tip for last here. What I like to do is apply a little bit of this Loon Outdoors UV weighted repair directly to that knot. Now, that's not to secure it, but instead I want to make this a little bit more of a smooth connection whenever it runs through my guides. Years ago, I was fishing on the Delaware River, and there was a lot of just slime in the water, and we had a bunch of knots in our leader, and every time we would pull that leader out, there was just all this slime hanging from all those knots. So somebody told us, hey, put a little bit of this UV glue on each one of those knots, and that slime won't attach to it anymore. Well, the same premise will work with this knot. I'll just take a little bit of my UV glue, just put some of it to that front end, a little bit on the rear end, just let it kind of loop around so you almost see kind of a teardrop form. Grab your UV light, hit it for anywhere between 10 to 15 seconds, and then just let it finish self-curing in the sun, and you'll have a really smooth connection. So that is all there is to this little knot that I tied with the Angler's Image tool. Really cool little tool. I definitely recommend it. It's one I've been using for years. So now let me change this camera angle back, and I'll give you one final little tip and talk a little bit more about this nail knot tool. That was the nail knot connection, and I hope you agree with me in saying that this is just an easy to use tool for it. The other great thing about this is that it's very small and it fits easily into my fly fishing vest, and I keep it there alongside a couple brand new leaders and the directions on how to use it. Basically, I want to make sure that if something happens to my leader when I'm out fishing, I can quickly reattach another one. I keep the directions right there alongside of it. Even though it's simple to use and I have them memorized, I want to make sure that if I'm ever out fishing, we'll say during a sulfur hatch, and I have fish rising all over the place, as I quickly scramble to reattach my leader, I want to make sure that I know exactly how to use this so I can get back to fishing as quickly as possible. Now, there are a couple other comments that I want to make about the nail knot. For starters, there's a lot of fly lines that I've purchased over the last few years that have a welded loop just built right into them. It looks really nice, but in almost every instance, the first thing that I'll do is simply cut off that loop because I really prefer to use that nail knot. So I'll attach my fly line directly to my leader. There's really one instance in which I won't do that, and that's if I'm going to be using a fly line in which I plan on having some type of a weight system attached to the front. Now, we call those weight systems sink tips. And what's really nice about sink tips is that they come with different sizes, and they basically will help to get your leader and your fly in different columns of the water. So that's great if you're targeting fish in certain places. Now, the one really nice thing about those sink tips is that they typically have a welded loop in them. So if I have a fly line already with that welded loop and I know I'm going to be using a sink tip system with that line, then I'll typically leave that in place just for that ease of use. So I want to mention that to all of you in the event you like to use sink tips or you plan on using them in the future. I also know some individuals that will actually just use a nail nut, then they'll run just a monofilament or fluorocarbon, kind of a butt section, a really short section directly to a loop, and they'll tie a loop in the end of that. Then they can kind of quickly attach things on and off of there. But in my mind, I either prefer to go with a fluorocarbon or a monofilament leader attached with a nail nut directly to my fly line, or if I have a fly line with that welded loop already in it, I'll keep it there if I'm going to be using a sink tip system. So I wanted to at least mention that to all of you. So kind of think about that system that you want to have in place with your fly line, or if you're like me, with your fly lines and all of those different lines that we have out there. Well, with that said, I really appreciate you viewing this video. And if you have any questions for me, you can email me at tcammisa@gmail.com. But more importantly, I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. Is there another knot or is there another tool that you prefer to use when you're connecting your leader or your backing to your fly line? Or like me, do you have a really funny story where you probably didn't do something correctly and you had a major malfunction, kind of like that steelhead? I'd love to hear from you down below in the comment section, and thanks ahead of time for anything that you leave down there. If you'd like to watch more videos like this, you can check out my website, which is troutandfeather.com. And this is part of my From Vise to Water series. So when you go to my website, if you click videos, you'll see this section on From Vise to Water. And basically, this series is really about no more just the fly tying, but what do we do next to really be efficient and effective once we get to the water. So that's where you'll see this video housed. If you're into social media, Trout and Feather has both an Instagram and a Facebook page, and I'd love to connect there. So once again, thank you everybody, and I'll see you next time.
Everywhere I